I was still wearing the same black dress for my mom's funeral when I got home and realized my key didn't work anymore. At first, I thought I was just exhausted and shaking too much to turn the lock, but then I saw the new keypad installed on the front door and the small, cold note taped to the frame with my brother's handwriting. "This house is mine now. You need to find somewhere else to stay." I stood there in disbelief, my heels sinking into the wet grass, clutching my purse like it could somehow hold what was left of my life, while inside I could hear movement, drawers opening, footsteps, things being shifted like I had already been erased. I knocked, then pounded, then begged, but when he finally opened the door, he didn't look sad or guilty, just annoyed, like I was an inconvenience he had already dealt with. And when I asked him how he could do this to me the day we buried our mother, he smirked and said, "You'll understand soon enough," before shutting the door in my face again. What he didn't know, what he couldn't possibly know, was that 72 hours later, he wouldn't just regret this moment. He would be standing in front of me, desperate, broken, and begging me to fix the one thing he had just destroyed. I'm 27, married, and I thought I understood what family meant, at least until the day my mom died and everything I believed about loyalty, love, and trust shattered in a matter of hours. Growing up, it was always just the three of us after my dad passed, and even though my brother was older, Mom and I were inseparable, especially in the last few years when her health started declining, and I became the one taking her to appointments, managing her medications, and sitting by her side through every long, quiet night. My brother, on the other hand, only showed up when it was convenient or when money was involved. But somehow, he always managed to charm his way back into Mom's good graces, and I ignored the uneasy feeling in my gut because I didn't want to believe he could ever truly hurt me. The day of the funeral, I was emotionally drained, running on autopilot, trying to hold myself together, but nothing could have prepared me for coming home to find myself locked out of the very house I had cared for and called my own, or for the realization that my brother had already made his move before the grief had even settled. And as I stood there, heart pounding and mind racing, I knew one thing for certain. This wasn't just about inheritance. This was the beginning of something much bigger, and I had no idea yet just how far he was willing to go. I barely slept that night, crashing on my friend Jenna's couch with my phone clutched in my hand, replaying everything over and over, trying to make sense of how my own brother could lock me out of our childhood home just hours after we buried Mom. By morning, the shock had hardened into something sharper. Anger mixed with a deep, gnawing suspicion that this hadn't been a spur-of-the-moment decision. So I drove back to the house, hoping maybe he'd cooled off or at least be willing to talk like a normal human being. But when I pulled up, I noticed something that made my stomach drop. A moving truck parked out front and two strangers carrying boxes out of the house like it was already sold. I rushed up the driveway, demanding to know what was going on, and that's when my brother stepped out, calm, composed, almost smug, holding a folder in his hand like he'd been waiting for me. And before I could even get a word out, he said, "You should have checked the will," and handed me a single photocopied page that claimed everything, every asset, the house, Mom's accounts, had been left entirely to him. My hands were shaking as I read it because it didn't sound like her, not even close, especially the part that said I had already been financially supported enough, which was a complete lie considering I was the one paying half her medical bills while he barely contributed. When I looked up and told him this didn't make sense, that Mom would never cut me out like this, he just shrugged and said, "Well, she did," then added, almost casually, "And I've already started the sale process, so you should probably move on," like he was talking about returning a shirt, not erasing me from my own family. I felt something break inside me in that moment, not just from the betrayal, but from the way he said it, with zero hesitation, zero guilt, like he had planned this, like he'd been waiting for the exact moment Mom was gone to take everything and push me out. And as I stood there watching strangers carry pieces of my life, I realized this wasn't just a fight over money anymore. This was war. I didn't argue with him anymore after that because something about the way he stood there, so confident, so certain he had already won, told me I needed to stop reacting and start thinking. So I got back in my car, hands still trembling, and instead of going back to Jenna's place, I drove straight to my mom's old bank, the one I had taken her to dozens of times over the past 2 years. Because if there was one thing I knew, it was that my mom trusted routine and documentation more than anything. When I walked in, the manager recognized me immediately, her expression softening when she realized why I was there. And after I explained everything, carefully, calmly, even though my chest felt like it was caving in, she hesitated for a moment before telling me something that made my heart skip. Just 3 weeks before my mom passed, there had been a sudden request to change several key account details and authorize a large transfer, but the request had raised internal flags because it didn't match my mom's usual behavior, so it had been delayed pending additional verification. I felt a cold wave wash over me as I asked who had made the request, and when she said my brother's name, everything started clicking into place in a way that made me sick. Because this meant he hadn't just taken advantage of the situation, he had been setting this up while mom was still alive, possibly when she was too weak to fully understand what was happening. The manager then added that my mom had actually come in herself a few days later, visibly upset, and had asked to reverse or block certain changes, insisting that everything remain as originally intended. But due to her declining condition, they had advised her to put any final decisions in writing with her attorney. That was the moment I realized my brother had shown me only a single page of what he claimed was the will, not the full document. And suddenly his rush to sell the house, to move everything out, to get me out of the picture, it all made terrifying sense. Because if there was anything in the real will that contradicted him, he needed it gone before I could find it. And as that truth settled in, my fear started to turn into something much colder and more focused, because now I knew he hadn't just betrayed me, he had made a mistake. I left the bank with a copy of the flagged transaction report and drove straight to my mom's attorney's office. My pulse steady now in a way that scared even me, because the grief was still there, but it had been buried under something sharper: purpose. When I walked in and gave my mom's name, the receptionist immediately ushered me into a private room, and within minutes, her attorney sat across from me with a file in his hands, his expression serious but not surprised, like he had been expecting this moment. And before I could even explain everything, he said, "I was wondering when you'd come," which sent a chill down my spine. He then opened the file and pulled out the full original will, signed, notarized, and dated properly. And as I scanned the pages, my breath caught, because it was nothing like the single page my brother had shown me. In fact, the real will clearly divided everything equally between us, with one very specific clause that stood out. Any attempt to manipulate, coerce, or misrepresent the terms would result in immediate disqualification from inheritance. My hands tightened around the paper as the attorney explained that my mom had come to him just days before her condition worsened, visibly distressed, saying she feared someone was trying to pressure her into changing things, but she refused, insisting everything remain fair and protected. Then he said something that made everything snap into place. My brother had come in after her passing, alone, requesting an expedited execution of the will, but when asked for proper documentation, he had only provided a partial, unofficial copy, which the attorney immediately rejected, advising him that nothing could proceed without full verification. That's when I realized my brother hadn't legally secured anything yet. He had just been bluffing, rushing, trying to intimidate me into disappearing before the truth surfaced. And suddenly, the image of him standing there so smug, so sure of himself, replayed in my mind. But this time, it didn't make me feel hurt. It made me feel something else entirely, because now I wasn't the one locked out anymore. He was the one standing on the edge of losing everything. I didn't go back to the house right away. Instead, I let him keep moving, keep selling, keep digging himself deeper. Because with the real will, the bank records, and my mom's attorney on my side, I finally had something stronger than emotion. I had proof. And over the next 48 hours, everything began to unravel exactly the way he had tried to rush it together. The buyers he'd lined up were suddenly put on hold when the attorney filed an immediate legal notice disputing any sale. The bank accounts he thought he could access were frozen pending investigation, and the moving company stopped mid-job when they were informed there was an active ownership conflict, leaving half our childhood home packed in boxes and the other half in chaos. Then, exactly 72 hours after he locked me out, my phone rang, and when I saw his name, I almost didn't answer. But I did, and the voice on the other end was nothing like the one I had heard before. Gone was the smug confidence, replaced with panic so raw it was almost unrecognizable, as he stumbled over his words, asking if we could just talk, if I could come over and sort things out. And when I finally agreed and walked back up to that same front door, he opened it before I could knock, looking exhausted, desperate, like the last 3 days had aged him years. The house behind him was a mess of half-packed boxes and halted plans, and for the first time, he didn't block my way. Instead, he stepped aside and said quietly, "I need you to fix this." And as I walked past him into the home he had tried to steal, I realized something he was only just beginning to understand. This was never his to control, and now, whether he liked it or not, everything depended on me. I stood there in the middle of that half-packed living room, looking at my brother, the same person who had locked me out without a second thought, now barely able to meet my eyes as he asked me to fix the mess he created. And for a moment, I let the silence stretch just long enough for him to feel exactly what I had felt standing outside that door, helpless and discarded. Then I calmly pulled the original will from my bag and placed it on the table between us, watching the color drain from his face as he realized the truth he had tried so hard to hide was now right in front of him, undeniable and final. And I told him, clearly, that not only had he lost any claim to the inheritance because of what he'd done, but everything he tried to rush, every deal, every move, was now under legal review, and there was nothing I was going to do to stop it. He started apologizing, stumbling over excuses, blaming stress, grief, anything he could think of. But it didn't matter anymore, because karma had already caught up to him in a way no argument ever could. And as I walked out of that house, this time by choice, I realized I hadn't lost anything at all. I had simply been shown the truth. If you believe people always get what they deserve in the end, make sure you like, subscribe, and share your thoughts below, because stories like this prove karma never misses.